3,000! History with an exclamation point!
Anthony for three. Bang! That one goes down, and the game is tied. Yankees are champions of baseball.
All right. Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, episode 990 of BD4 here as we keep getting closer and closer to 1K. But more importantly, we keep getting closer to the baseball season. As pitchers and catchers report in about a week, that's going to be fun. So as that's happening, we have all offseason, continue to talk about different Yankees and the expectations and some of the expectations with certain units of the team, like the bullpen, and specifically has been a big topic of conversation this offseason for us. And with pitchers and catchers reporting in about 8 days, I wanted to come on here and actually, today's the 4th. Pitchers and catchers, is that the 12th? They report on the 12th. So, yeah, a week, 7 days. No, that's 8 days. I can't do math. So on the 12th, pitchers and catchers report. And because of that, I wanted to talk about a specific Yankee reliever that I know I didn't really talk much about him at all. I mean, this is like somebody who nobody really cares about, and it's understandable if you're more of a casual Yankees fan or just a Yankees fan who is frustrated with the offseason. Why are you coming on here and you're talking about some random guy? But there is some good stuff here with this kid who we're going to discuss in this episode. This is a player who, let's go all the way back. He spent 3 years pitching at Illinois State before being drafted by the Twins in the 9th round of the 2019 draft. Very quiet 2021 in low A ball, dominated high A in 2022, was promoted to Double A that season, and then instantly became one of their top prospects. I think he was the number 25 prospect in their system. That was back in 2023, and then he later that season debuted, and in his debut picked up his first save. He's a guy who's now in the big leagues, under team control he's making pre-arbitration money, so it's less than $1 million, and he's under team control for a while. Lifetime numbers for this kid through 51 2/3 innings, 3 big league seasons, again, but not really 3. 4.70 ERA, 126 whip, 236 average, 9% walk rate, 29% K rate, and 2.1 home runs per 9 allowed. So some good, some bad, some mixed results. But last season, he pitched for the Yankees. They claimed him off waivers. He came up, and he did a very nice job through 23 innings. And if you haven't been able to tell by now, that's Chase Headrick. The amount of times that when I was doing my notes here that I wrote down Chase Headrick and not Brent Headrick is wild, because I think it's just I'm connecting him with Chase Headley because it's similar. But that is Brent Headrick. And I want to make sure it's Brent and not Brett. Now I'm getting confused. Gardner and all this shit. Hold on one second. This is really good podcasting here. It's a good start that we're off to on this wonderful Wednesday morning. It is Brent. Brent Headrick did a very nice job through 23 innings with the Yankees last year. Nothing off the charts, but 3.13 ERA, 1.04 whip, 202 batting average, 7 walks to an 8% walk rate, 30 strikeouts to a 33% K rate, 4 home runs allowed to a 1.6 homers per 9. So, again, still some bad there, but overall the run prevention is very good. The strikeout stuff, very good. He had a few scoreless outings in the beginning of the season before he was optioned back down. He came back for some of May and June because Fernando Cruz went to the DL, and he was out a while, so they called up Headrick. Came up, struggled. And then was optioned for Scott Efros to come up in like the middle of June. Wasn't with the squad for a bit, came back up late in the summer, and he looked really good again. And he was missing a ton of bats, and he had some impressive outings. I remember he had a really good outing against the Rays. He had an outing that caught a lot of baseball fans' attention on Twitter against the Astros, where he just struck out a bunch of guys. But then after that, I think it was a game, it actually might have been a game against the Rays or the Twins, I don't remember, where he gets hit on the forearm, and then a couple of maybe a week later, that ends up putting him back on the DL, a contusion, and he doesn't pitch ever again the rest of the season. But we're talking about a guy who the Yankees like, and I think they like him for a reason. He's a big, hard-throwing lefty with some good stuff. His stuff plus graded out at 107 last year. You have to remember, before we go through this episode, little disclaimer, it was a very small sample. Keep in mind that every metric I'm going to read, every statistic I'm going to read off is through 23 innings of last year. So just keep that in mind. It's hard to fully buy into that, but there is some good to look at here. So 107 stuff plus, 41% chase rate. If he would have qualified, that's the best chase rate in baseball, 100th percentile. 34% whiff rate. Again, if he would have qualified, that would be better than 90th percentile. He had a 33% K rate, as we mentioned. Again, if he qualified, that would have been 90th or better than 90th percentile. A 3.83 FIP, a 3.12 expected ERA, and a 206 expected batting average. So a good, solid stint there in 2023. But what I like about this kid is he's got a good enough pitch mix for both sides. And that is one of the first things I look at in a reliever. As much as I love my velocity, and as much as I love pitchers who've got great break, one of the first things I look at is, do you have a pitch mix that can help you neutralize a lefty and a righty, right? Because if you do that, then I really don't care if you're another lefty in this pen or if you're just another righty in this pen, because you are capable of getting both sides out. If you're a righty with a changeup and a fastball, it's not going to help me because I need to see you, what do you have for right-handed bats? But if you have a changeup and you got a slider, then we could talk. In Brent Headrick's case, he's got a pitch mix for both sides. He's a 2-pitch pitcher for lefties. He's fastball, slider. And then he's a 3-pitch pitcher for righties, where he is fastball, slider, splitter. So the 4-seamer is his best weapon. It is a pitch that grades out above average, 103 stuff plus. And what I like about it is the life on it, because there's a ton of things that he does to make this 4-seamer play up even more than it is. First and foremost, there has been an uptick in velo like every year. In his final year of college, he was sitting 88 with the fastball. In his final year in the minors, he was sitting 91. In his first 2 big league seasons, he was sitting 92. And then last year, he came up and we saw him throw 94 on average, but you did see him touch 95, 96 regularly. And it's a fastball that not only could do 94 to 96, but it plays up because, one, it has a lot of ride. It gets 3 more inches of induced rise than your average left-handed 4-seamer does. He has a very over-the-top downhill delivery for a big dude, 6'6", 235. That helps it play up. He gets great extension on his release, 7 inches of extension on his release, which would have been 88th percentile in baseball last year. So all of that not just helps his fastball play up, but it should also help the off-speed play up too, because hitters can no longer just sit back and wait for his off-speed if he's throwing that heat. Now they have to respect the heater. So that's going to be the big swing factor for him. It's a pitch that gets a ton of swing and miss, 25% whiff rate last year. That's 78th percentile for 4-seamers. It has a lot of spin, 2,400 RPMs on it, 77th percentile. It's a very Luke Weaver type fastball where it just has life in many different ways. And I can see that working well against righties as long as he maintains that velocity. But he has some good secondaries. The slider is a good pitch. It grades out very well. 114 stuff plus. Tons of swing and miss. 59% whiff rate last year. So if he qualified in whiff rate, that would have been not only best in baseball, but it would have been best in baseball by like 4 or 5%. So an incredible whiff rate on the slider. But it's interesting because you look into the profile of it, it doesn't break much. It doesn't have this off the chart spin on it, but it's tough to hit because I think it's a slow slider. It's like 2 miles an hour less in speed than your average lefty slider. And it also, because it's that slow, there's a much bigger dip in the velocity from his four seam. There's a 12 mile an hour dip from his slider to his four seam. That's a big difference when you're playing the slider off the heat. You know, a league average difference for slider to four seam for a lefty is 8 miles an hour. So he's 12. So I think that's why it works, because he sequences the slider and the four seam well, and he sequences it off the splitter too. You know, lefties against the slider were 3 for 13 last year, a couple extra base hits. It's a good potential pitch to tunnel with the four seamer to lefties, and then righties on the slider were 1 for 5 with 1 extra base hit. You can back foot it to them. It has good potential to tunnel with the splitter when you're facing a righty. Because the splitter is a solid pitch too for him. It's a pitch that grades out very well. Just like the slider, this pitch grades out very well in stuff plus 111. It gets a lot of drop. Over 2.5 more inches of induced drop than your average left-handed splitter. So if he qualified, that would have been about 74th percentile. It gets a lot of fade. Just under 2 more inches of induced fade than your average lefty split. If he qualified, that would have been about 70th percentile. It gets very little spin, which is good for a splitter. You want it to have that forkball look to it, kind of like Fernando Cruz and even Mark Leiter when he was here. Very little spin on it, 1,000 RPMs. So if he qualified, that would have been 76th percentile in spin rate from low to high. And again, I just think it has potential, that splitter slider, to be deadly sequencing. You know, so I'm just, I'm sitting here and I'm naming off all these things about him, and I just think he reminds me a lot of Luke Weaver. And I think there's a world out there where he could be similar to Luke Weaver if Matt Blake and Sam Brent and the rest of the Yankee pitching team can tap into him. It just seems like he's the perfect Matt Blake pitching lab experiment. It really does. I think if the Yankees can get him to tweak his pitch mix a bit, get a little bit creative, maybe they can untap him. Lean into the philosophy that they have of less four seam. He was 64% four seam last year, and lean more into your off speed. Maybe throw more splitter against righties. Again, we know that Matt Blake is good with changeups. Splitter, very similar pitch. Maybe more sliders against lefties. I just feel like there is potential here, especially with that pitch mix, to be a high strikeout, high ground ball guy too. I know he gives up some fly balls, some home runs, but there is the mix. The recipe for success is in there. Four-seamer and slider, they already get a lot of swing and miss. And you have a splitter, which is usually a high ground ball pitch. I know Weaver was more of a high strikeout, high fly ball pitcher, but he was similar, or they're both similar in a sense that, Weaver came in just like Headrick as a random, journeyman from a mid-market organization, but he also had good, promising underlying metrics and a lively fastball with spin, with ride, with some velocity to it, just like Headrick. I feel like both of these guys can be similar. They're both high strikeout, low walk guys. Very good K to walk ratio. That's usually a good indicator of a pitcher. So he's a lot younger than Weaver is too. I think Weaver, when he came to the Yankees, was, I want to say 29 years old. Hedrick's going into his second season with the Yankees this year, and he's just 28 years old, and he doesn't turn 29 until next offseason. So he's still young for a while. You still have him for a few years here. So I think he does break camp as long as he's healthy, because, again, the Yankees seem to like him. Boone seems to speak highly of him, and, he's in the organization until he's not, right? But I think they're going to keep him around. I think he's a solid pitcher. You just hope that of all these guys the Yankees got in the pen and some of the guys they've added, just pitching staff overall, you got Weathers, you've got Angel Chivi, you've got, is there another guy they got in here? I'm sure there is. I'm not thinking, but, project arms and some guys with high upside. You hope that one of these guys, two of these guys can find it this year, because it's a bullpen that I'm very worried about. Just, it's got a lot of guys with little track records, and we've spoken countless amounts of times about that, how the Yankees rely too much on Matt Blake turning a diamond into turning a diamond in a rough type guy to hit his full ceiling, right? So we'll see. Let me know what you think. But with that said, we're going to head to a break really quickly, and then we'll wrap this up when we return from break with our final thoughts. Stay with us.
Quick break here, guys. Stay connected with BD4 on social media. Follow us on Instagram and X at BD4Pod, and find us on Facebook by searching BD4. Don't miss out. Join the conversation. Want more BD4? Subscribe to our YouTube channel and never miss an episode. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and share with your fellow fans. Don't forget to ring that bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. Love BD4 but don't have the time to sit down and watch? Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review. It helps us grow and keeps the conversation going.
All right. Welcome back to the show. Sorry about that. Episode 990 of the podcast, as we continue to conclude this episode here. Just a little episode here on Brent Headrick, and why I think there could be something here to tap into. Listen, I think baseball fans in general really, 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 like, we just talked about how the Yankees rely too much on like project arms, and I get that, and I think it's a problem. I also think you have to be able to see the other side of it, because I think a lot of baseball fans in general really need to stop obsessing so much over pure raw results, especially when we're talking about young players who came up in really bad analytical organizations or just don't have much of a resume of bad results. It's just a couple of years. Or guys who come over from like the Rockies, like this Chivi kid. I don't think it's fair to say, oh, they're not good because of that, because of their results in a small sample, or their results from a bad team. Not everyone develops in the same situation. Not everyone gets the same tools and the data available to them, the same coaching. You can't just look at a stat line and decide who a pitcher is. At some point, you have to actually use your baseball instincts again. Watch the guy. Look at the stuff. Look at the shape of the pitches, the movement, the command, how hitters are reacting, how he's sequencing. That stuff matters. Development is not always linear, and it's definitely not just a spreadsheet. It's not just baseball reference. We've kind of, in my opinion, swung way too far into treating players like they're robots. Like, if the numbers don't immediately say good, then the player is just what he is forever. And that's never been how baseball works, especially with pitching. Some guys need time. Some guys need a new organization. Some guys need better information around them. And what's really odd is that, like, a lot of people will say they agree with this sentiment, they'll say, yeah, context matters, development matters. I agree. And then the second a pitcher gives up a couple of runs, has a bad outing, gets right back to box score watching, and there's just no patience. There's no nuance. I just think that's lazy analysis. You can be modern and still trust your eyes. You can be old school and still trust your eyes. You can use data and still understand the game. The best evaluations are when those two things actually work together, not when we pretend one replaces the other. If you care about baseball, especially pitching, because I am a pitching nerd, you owe it to yourself to think deeper than just ERA and win-loss record. God, I hope people still aren't using that. Because if you don't, you're not really evaluating the players. You're just reacting to outcomes. And that's not analysis. That is not analysis. So I think it's a lot more about process. And I say this with basketball too. But that's what I like about data, about these metrics that come, because they are able to tell us all the things that we always spoke about and talked about growing up, all the fundamental stuff. It's now recorded, and that's pretty cool. You can see that actual stuff. So all this to say, I think there's a world where some of these guys like the Yankees have in their bullpen can reach their potential. Again, it is very annoying that an organization with the Yankees resources, their prospect capital, their finances, that they can go and spend on some bigger names. I am all for that, but I also think at the same time, you can't sit here and tell me they're destined to fail because you don't like a guy who you don't know much about. At least be willing to learn. So, with that all said, that's why I think Brent Headrick could be a decent arm for the Yankees this year. But you all let me know what you think. Just realize we have the thumbnail up the entire time, so if you're watching the video, sorry about that. But that's all we got anyway. I do appreciate you all tuning in, and we are going to check out. So I'll see you in the next one. Brent Headrick, what do you think? Later. Hey guys, thank you for listening to BD4. Be sure to follow us on social media, subscribe to us on YouTube, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time.